Welcome, everybody, to the end of the week. I hope that it's been a strong one as we wrap up week 2 of virtual education. I know that all of these things take some adjustment time, and I hope that even as the week is concluding here, you feel like your feet are more firmly on the ground. Even if you're a little bit tired, we're working out some of the kinks, and I hope that that's been a good thing. Here's your third starter activity as you think about heraldry. We talked about that in our last lesson, said that it was going to be found on the shields. What was it? And then what was the purpose? Why did they do this or use this on their shields? Go ahead and take a minute here and wrap up your third starter activity of the week. Hopefully, this will bring you to a closing point for your homework. You can go ahead and submit that to week 2 of online education. Before we get started, I want to introduce you to a project that we're going to be working on. For many of you, perhaps you're going to get started on this over the weekend. Others of you, it'll be that the first part of the week, whatever your prerogative is fine, but you're going to get a shield. I'm going to post that even as we come in on Friday here. I'm going to go ahead and post that to the class page, and you're going to be responsible for crafting a shield. Now, it can look like any of these in terms of the layout. So if you would prefer it to be like the one on the left, where there's going to be 3 different pictures, that's fine. You need to have at least 3 though. I've had students that have done something like the lower right there, which is red, white, and blue, not with those colors, but having it be layered like that. But it has to be between 3 and 4 images. And what I'm looking for, and I'll explain this as I post the assignment, but what I'm looking for is for you to pick 3 to 4 things that are passions of yours. As we think about heraldry, and I won't give that away what that is so that you again have to look back, but as we talk about that, I want you to pick 3 or 4 things that define you. As you think about life so far, the first 14 or 15 years, what are 3 to 4 things, whether it be family, it be faith, it'd be a certain sport, it'd be reading or art, a lot of different things that you could create that would then weave together to define who you are as a person. Now, we all understand we're multifaceted, we've got a lot going on, but I'd like you to try to boil it down to 3 to 4 things. Now, I'd prefer if it be done in colored pencil, but if you do not have colored pencil and you feel like you can do a neat job on Notability or some kind of art app, I am okay with that, but I want you to import the shield that I'm giving you. I don't want you to go kind of find another version. I like the one that we're using, so I'm going to go ahead and post that, and I'd like you to reproduce a shield that is going to be unique to you, 3 to 4 items that are going to be identifying of who you are. Please go ahead and put titles. Some of the images that students have put in the past are indecipherable. So if you would just put a one-word title, that'll help me kind of understand what you're going for. Even if your art isn't amazing, that can probably tip your hand as to what is supposed to be there. That helped me put in some good time and effort, hopefully even over the weekend, being able to think through, okay, who am I and what are some of the things that might define that? All right, here we go. As we think about warfare, obviously now with shield money becoming a thing, we're going to start to see more and more fighting beginning to happen. And the church is concerned about this. They look at what's happening, and I think there's a healthy amount of fear that it could get out of hand. And so they tried to reduce fighting in 2 different ways. 2 different ideas that are going to hopefully bring to at least a limited degree what fighting is happening. First is going to be called the peace of God. The peace of God. Within that, if anybody is going to plunder, which means to attack or come at a church, a monastery, or any other holy place that might be set apart, or if they were to go after civilians, kill, attack civilians, non combatants, they would not be given the sacraments. Now, in most evangelical churches, I would imagine sacraments aren't talked a whole lot about, but within the Catholic Church, they're a big deal. There's several sacraments. I'll give you a few of these. Within class, I like to kind of probe the audience and see kind of what you guys are aware of in terms of sacraments. But the Eucharist, which is the Lord's Supper, is one of them. We'll be talking a little bit more about that as we move into Unit 8. There's going to be the sacrament of marriage, the sacrament of baptism. There's several that are going to be woven in there. If you go to Catholic churches or Orthodox churches, I imagine you're aware of even more, but that's just a limited list of what would be considered sacraments. If you go after any of these things that were described in the peace of God, you would not be given those, and especially for the Eucharist, but these other things too, they were expected that those things would be necessary to be able to get into heaven. As you look at that, that was going to be a pretty big deal. The second way that the church is going to try to limit fighting is going to be called the truce of God. The truce of God. I don't know if you've ever been squabbling with a sibling, and I don't know if you would even use this word, but basically you come to an agreement where you're going to stop fighting. That's called a truce. Not that any of you ever fight with your siblings, but if you do, as you look at that, you've probably brokered a truce or two in your day, but a truce is going to be when fighting is stopping. So as we think about the truce of God, this agreement says that there is going to be no fighting between when the sun goes down on Wednesday and when the sun rises the following Monday. So that means that there is going to be no fighting from basically Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. As you look at that, the weekend extended is going to be a time where there is going to be no fighting. I've had students suggest in the past that maybe as teachers, we should take on the truce of God and within the dynamic teacher to student not offer homework within that window of time. Typically, I'm okay with that on the weekend, but I think Wednesday night, Thursday, and Friday might be a little bit of a bigger window to not have homework. That would basically mean that you would only have homework on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. I'm not sure that school would really work like that. But as you think about the truce of God, no fighting during that time. But it was also extended to holy seasons. We're in the middle of one right now as we kind of work our way toward Easter. I think that you guys know that we're in the middle of Lent. Maybe some of your churches have talked about that a little bit more, but we also have Advent. Perhaps some of you guys in the past have worked through an Advent calendar as you've worked your way toward Christmas Day. Those are all holy seasons within the church calendar that are going to be important. And during those times, you are not supposed to fight under the truce of God. As a general rule, though, the Knights are going to largely disregard these. They say, hey, we're going to go out and fight, even though they face excommunication, getting kicked out of the church. I think for a lot of these guys, fighting is more important than even what they perceive to be their eternal destiny. I think that a lot of them are fixated on the fighting and perhaps even money. It's basically the temporal, the here and now versus what's to come. As you look at this, this is going to be only limited in its effectiveness as we think about fighting. There's going to be a couple of different stages. We'll work through two of them before we break, but I want to talk about the first stage as we think about this kind of rise toward becoming a knight. The first is going to be at the age of 7. They're going to be sent to another lord's castle. 7 years old, typically for many of you, is like second grade. So you think about being second grade and being sent away. We talked about that a little bit as we were just starting the year, as we thought about young boys going off to train for Sparta. But these boys are going to now step into another lord's castle. I think in a lot of ways, maybe you're seeing this now as you do homeschool in essence, but I think to be trained under someone else, even versus your parents, maybe there's just a different dynamic that's there. That's what they experienced. If they're going to have to be harsh on you, maybe especially if you're not blood, that might be easier. Whatever the case might be, they would be sent to another castle for that training. The first stage that they're going to go through is what is called the page stage. As you look at this, this is going to be when they're going to be a page. During this time, the woman of the castle is going to be the main trainer, the one who is going to be instructing them. And during that time, they would be learning manners and Christian values, things that would be refining of who they were. In theory, some of this would have been brought up even for the first few years of life. I imagine even at 5 or 6, many of you guys were disciplined in some way or shape or form by your parents trying to instill certain values in you. But as we look at this, this is going to be a different level of instruction and intensity that woman would now be responsible for training the boy in. They're also going to be instructed in more the musical side. Obviously, respect for women is going to be super important as we come back Later today, we'll be looking at this code of chivalry and how that's going to interact with women, but they're also going to be responsible for training the boy in singing and dancing and even playing a musical instrument. Some of you guys would be dynamite at this, and others of us, I think, might struggle. I'll put myself at the top of that list. If this was what was going to be taught to me, I think that the woman of the house would be very frustrated because I can't do really any of these things, but except for respecting women. As we think about singing and dancing and musical instruments, though, basically I think I'm a lost cause, and that's all right. But for you guys, maybe this would be up your alley, which would be great. At some point during that window, you might even be instructed in reading and writing and math. We've talked before a little bit about the three R's. I realize that this is not necessarily three R's, but they would always refer to it, especially in colonial America, as the three R's: reading, writing, and arithmetic. Basically, reading, writing, and math. As you look at these things, these are going to be the basis for the foundation of their education. Once they're a page and they had acquired all that they needed to know, they would then become a squire. That was typically around the age of 14. At 14 years old, which is where a lot of you are at right now, you would then transition from doing the academic, the musical, the manners, to the battlefield, trying to now learn from the lord of the castle, making sure that you could acquire those skills. Few things that you would be responsible for doing: you'd be carrying the armor, so basically an armor bearer. You would be responsible for guarding prisoners. No offense, but for some of you, if I thought about prisoners being under your watch, I don't know how nervous or terrified they would be. They might look at you and kind of snicker and say, well, I think I might be making a break for it today. But as you think about these guys, we're going to see this being the basis, the foundation of their training on the battlefield, hardening them for what they're going to face down the road. Basically, these skills that are going to be necessary as they step into becoming a knight. We're going to see even writing, handling weapons, learning how to use those effectively, making sure that they could carry themselves well on the battlefield. Well, we've gone through the page and the squire stages. We'll come back and we'll talk about the knight and then how that's going to play out even within the code of chivalry. Girls, not that you're neglected, we will talk about what it was for a young girl's education as well, and then we'll be wrapped up for the week. Hope that you guys are faring well, and I'll see you soon.